Cloud. All right. Well, good evening. Thank you, Cassie and Grant, for being here. I know we are expecting two other board members. Hopefully, they will join us for this meeting of our task force. I will share the agenda here in a second. Let me just get to it. But overall, tonight we're going to be, as a task force, looking at the questions. Oh, here is one of our board members in the waiting room. Give me a second. Let me let her in. Hopefully this time it works. Ah, this time it did work. Okay, awesome. Let me rename Martha. Okay. And so now we're just waiting on Crystal, see if she gets to join us tonight. In the meantime, I will go and find the uh the agenda for tonight. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen so you all can see the agenda. Okay. Can you all see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, good. Again, we don't have a quorum. We did put this out and we did not have any members of the public reach out. So we are going to go ahead and call to order. I can do that since this is not a quorum, and we don't have any public invited to be heard. I discussed that with Brenda before she left tonight. So we're going to go ahead and jump into number 3. So I'm going to stop sharing this. And then I'm going to share the actual application. I sent you all a copy of the application. I'm going to go over it first, and then we can jump into the conversation. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Share screen. And I want to share screen 1. Share. Okay. Can you see the application?
Yep.
All right. Okay. So before we jump into the questions, I'm just going to go over the application to give you all just a general overview of it. Like I said in my informational email, basically the application is broken up into, you could consider it 3 parts. One, the first part is the actual agency level questions, which the staff reviews. And within that, we have client demographics and some financial questions. And then the portion where the 2 portions where I think the board has the most involvement and actually does evaluate is the program section and then the scope of work. So I'm gonna go over the agency level, but I'm gonna primarily focus after that on kind of going over the program level questions, because that is where you do the majority of your work as board members. So again, we allow for nonprofits, governments to apply. This is just kind of what we call qualifying questions, and if you qualify to apply or not. And we ask how much you want to request from each of the funding agencies. Of course, now there is City of Lafayette as well added to this one. And then this right here is where we start the agency level questions. This is the first questions they look at. Of course, for me, I think the most important part is these 2 pieces right here. And you might, if you, those that have been in the hearing with me will know that I very often ask the agencies that are in the hearings about what their agency goals is. And this is a challenge for many folks. Many agencies, correlate their programmatic goals with their agency goals. And I don't. I think agency goals are really about agency sustainability, fundraising, board development, etc. Programmatic goals are more around who they want to serve, how they want to serve them, what things they want to do. And those are fine, but I always want to make sure that they're thinking about how to become a more sustainable program or sustainable agency to make sure that those programs are sustainable. We have a board of directors table. They can either fill it out or they can upload. Same thing with clients. We want to know. And this question here this is one of the ones that I read because I do have a question in my evaluation about inclusivity, how they're working to create and implement inclusive practices throughout the organizations. And again, for the 2024 application, they did add, or Boulder County added a separate section. I think you all got to see it. We didn't use it necessarily for our evaluation. We can change that in the future, but that's something that was added. Then we have
is that added sheet? It was one of my questions. Is that just used for the city to score the organization, or does the board use that and score?
I didn't even look at the Boulder. I mean, I read it, but I did not. The Boulder County questions did not. That was a pilot for Boulder County. Boulder County added it to the application, and it was their staff that reviewed that piece.
Got it.
Again, it was a pilot. We can decide as a board later on whether we want to accept those and use those. It'll mean more reading. It'll mean developing more questions for the evaluation, which is fine. But this year we did not use those questions because it was primarily, it was really meant for Boulder County.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Agency budget. This is a little challenging for some agencies that only have one program. They use the same budget for their program budget and their agency budget. And so I have to have conversations with them about that. One of the things that I always look for is, do they have 3 months of reserves? And how do they access those in case of difficult times? These questions are important to me, not necessarily to you, but these are part of what I evaluate. I want to make sure part of my questions are they a fiscally sustainable organization? So I have to look at that as part of my evaluation. And then we ask for some just supporting documents. If they have an audit, love to read it, love to look at it. Want to make sure that they are tax exempt, and if they have their year-end financial documents are always helpful. And then we come to what you all do. You don't do this part. This part is part of the, they got to select one, and that doesn't necessarily impact the board that much. It impacts staff in the sense that we are the staff is the place where agencies get assigned to priority areas. So this is why there's a little asterisk. So Longmont has its own outcome statements that are connected to these shared outcomes, and that is in the application guide. And they kind of have to connect what they're doing with one of our activities and how they connect to these areas, right? And these are pretty broad. Ours are a little more specific, and it's kind of meant to be that way. So it's pretty easy for them to, connect back. And they get to choose those things. And then here are the questions, right? Here are the questions that you all are looking at. And here's where we can start having the conversation. The first question is really around what issue are they trying to address? Is it mental health? Is it food insecurity? Is it self-sufficiency? And so the question is, we ask them to describe the community issue that it will address, and what positive change do they envision from the program, right? So
right, so this might sound like anyhow, what exactly do we mean by community? Like, is it different for each applicant or?
You know, that's a great question. I think because these are funded by the government, we're thinking municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
So like everybody in the municipality, right? We're not talking, either racial, ethnic, or other type of community. We're talking about all of Longmont.
All of Longmont. Okay, that's what, yeah, all right, good, thanks.
Yeah. So that's, and again, stop me at any point if you. I mean, I sent this out last week or earlier this week to see if you all had any ideas, but really, we just want to know what is their larger vision about what they're doing, right? So, for example, I will use a food pantry, right? So, say if I was answering this question, what is the community issue that I'm addressing? Well, I'm going to address food insecurity. And what's the community-wide change? Well, I'm going to reduce food insecurity for low-income people in Longmont, right? That's how they should answer, something straightforward and easy. That's what I'm doing. The next question
I think
is, oh, go ahead,
when
Martha.
I read the question, it was very much like, just when I read the question, it was my brain to put it under one of the social determinants.
You're breaking up a little bit.
I don't know if that was just.
Could you say that again? Sorry, you were breaking up just a little bit.
I think it was like I think the interpretation of the question is very wide. So like when I read it, when it was sent to us, my brain wanted to put it in the social determinants of health, like those branches, but now I'm hearing that it's kind of like open to interpretation of like what the issue that you're trying to resolve is.
Right. Well, and to be fair, I mean, even I think it's because we are giving them the opportunity to tell us what they're doing. But I mean, if we wanted to connect it back to the social determinants of health, we would need to think of a way to do that, right? And it would probably be connected to the outcomes that are the shared outcome statements. So yeah, it is. I agree. It is a broad question about, what issue, because I mean, I guess you can make the argument that any issue they're addressing will connect back to the social determinants of health without having to state it, but we could ask them to state it. But I think, does the county still use social determinants of health, or does the city of Boulder still use those as their pillars like we do? I don't know. Any more thoughts on this question? Okay. And if you have an idea on how to improve it, that comes up later, you can always email me. I did let our partners know that we were having this meeting with this group, and that we were gonna take a look at it, and potentially send some suggestions to our board and of course to our partners as well. So our second question in this area is about the actual program itself. We asked them to describe the program and the anticipated benefits from the program. And then Longmont is the one who added this in 2020 about what historical or current inequities are being addressed. And so we added that piece to it in 2020. And I think folks have had a hard time answering that. Graham, I'm not sure if when you read that, if you see that they struggle to describe what inequities that they're actually trying to address. Because we've been asking it now this is our fourth year, I think.
Yeah, and that always confuses me. That's confusing because it's I don't know, it seems clear to me. And I remember the board, DEI was so important to, and continues to be to the board, but it felt like only staff got to score that. And this was the way of letting the board score it by saying, well, what is the program you're being funded doing specifically to help with inequity? Because all that other stuff about, well, do you have a diverse board, and is your agency incorporating DEI measures and all that stuff, like, as a board member, I want to make that relevant when I'm scoring, but I can't because I'm not scoring the agency. I'm scoring the
at that.
program. So yeah.
Right. Now, that being said, with what Boulder County has done that goes much deeper, I don't know if you all had a chance, of course, Cassie, you did not, but Martha and Graham, as you were reviewing your applications, I'm not sure if you delved deep into because I think you could see the Boulder County questions, correct?
Yeah, it's a page titled Boulder County Only Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And it's a great list of questions. I just, that's why I asked earlier, like, I'm interested in these answers, but I'm not sure the questions as a board member I'm supposed to score would be obviously influenced by them. Yeah.
Yeah, this past year you weren't, because again, it was the first time doing it and the county was piloting it. This next year we can, if we want to. And I think if we do, I would get rid of this second part of this question. I think if we adopt those more in-depth questions that the county is asking around diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think we probably don't need this. Oh, Crystal's here. Let me let her in. Give me 1 second. All right, Crystal's here.
So can we dig a little bit deeper on that, Eliberto? If we decided, yes, Longmont wants to incorporate this DEI questionnaire,
right,
then the board and staff would read it, and it could influence, our score of the program.
I think we would have to add another evaluation question specifically around that group of questions. But yeah, I think that's what we would have to do. If the board said, we really appreciated that questionnaire, we want to make it part of what we review, then we would probably have to add a new question or two specifically around those questions, which would change, of course, the funding allocation ranges, but that's nor here nor there, right? That's because of going to standard deviation. I don't think that matters. But if we do, then I think we would get rid of, I would suggest that we get rid of the second part of this question. I think most of that would be captured somewhat in that questionnaire. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, you could probably get rid of, and then we would get rid of our score, the board score question number 6, which is basically just, did the agency describe historical inequities? Or leave that, and we would use this extra sheet as the
right.
answer.
You could use the extra sheet as where you would draw the answer from. Martha.
Got it.
I mean, what I like is that they don't shy away from it in those questions. And I feel like if we could figure out how to get that in there, then we'd get what we're actually after anyway. So I would support getting rid of the ones that, because like, I don't know, probably 60-70% fumbled over the question.
Right. Right. And I think part of that, Martha, to be fair, is folks have been applying this for years, and I can't say with complete certainty, but I'm pretty confident there is copy and paste when it comes to program description, right? Because every grant in the world asks for your program description. And so I'm sure that that's part of the issue, that what you all are seeing is what they've been copying and pasting for quite some time. I don't say that everyone does that, but I'm pretty confident that many folks do. So yeah, I think if we were to adopt the questionnaire that Boulder County, put out, if we discuss this with the board and they would adopt it, then I think that would be, could look at question number 6, and we'll look at that tonight as well. We would look at question at our evaluations as well. Hey, Crystal, welcome. Sorry, you came right at the perfect time as we're really just diving into the work. Appreciate you being here.
Sorry for my tardiness.
No
My
worries, no
elementary
worries.
kiddo, she got in her first fight today, so there was a lot of talking and processing going on before I came.
Oh, sorry to hear that. No, it's totally fine. We're only at the second question, so we're just getting into it.
Okay, perfect.
And any other thoughts on the DEI portion of this question and putting it in comparison with the questionnaire and Cassie, you're a new person, so you didn't get to see those questions, but it's a pretty in-depth questionnaire. I think it's like 5 or 6 questions. They talk about DEI and how the agency is really implementing it, not only at the agency level, but the program level as well. So, and I can send that out too. I'll do that after the meeting. I'll send out the DEI questionnaire.
Yeah, it's page 10 of the packet as well. I agree with Martha. I think it would be interesting to just include this and then simplify this program description question. Take those last 2 sentences out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my vote.
All right. Well, we'll bring it up to the board. Tonight will be just recommendations to discuss with the board. I'm just gonna take notes. So remove second portion of program description question. Adopt Boulder County DEI questionnaire. Okay. All right. I got that down. Anything else before we move on to the next question? Any other thoughts? All right. So the next question is really about who are they trying to serve? We kind of want to know, who is this program really meant for? Is it, and part of that really has to do that this funding from council is really meant for low and moderate and primarily low income residents of Longmont. So for example, in the past we have had, I use this example, we had an agency that served firefighters. Great program. But I think the board felt that, firefighters, unless they're volunteer firefighters in this area probably would not be considered low income, right? So that it didn't really, meet the target population of the funding, right? So we didn't fund that agency as good as we thought it was, and the work they do, it wasn't aligned with who we were trying to use this funding for. And so we asked the question, like, who are we? So some of the agencies that struggle, there are some agencies that don't take, that don't do demographics or don't ask for income, and that could potentially hurt them, right? As you all score this, because we try and say it's understanding the need for the desire to help, and this funding has some targeted populations it wants to serve, and so it could hurt you if you don't let us know if you're providing services to people with lower incomes. So any thoughts on that question? Is that question helpful? Is another question that we could ask.
Can you tell me what page you're on, Aliberto?
I do not know. Oh, is there a packet?
Yeah, we did get an email of a PDF of the application. It's numbered different on our packet.
You know what?
It's
Maybe I'm
like
sharing the
12 or
wrong.
13.
On
Yeah, let
mine,
me-
it's numbers, it's page 6,
Really?
All right.
printed on
Let me.
April 4th. Maybe.
That's okay. I'll just join the meeting from my computer so I can see. So I can see what you guys are
Okay.
seeing.
All right. Let me. Uh. When did I send this?
Oh, I can't move it.
Page 12 in my packet. I must have a different one.
Here comes Crystal again in the computer. I'm looking to see when I sent it. Because if I am looking at something different, then I need to make sure that we're all looking at the same thing. Okay, here's the board. I sent it last week. Oh, you know what? I am so sorry. I am really sorry. This is. I'm going to open this file and I'm going to share this file instead. Okay, hold on. How do I make it bigger? Can you all see this one?
Yes.
Yes, and we can zoom in from our end if we need to make it larger.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Oh, here it is. It's hard to see because it's. Aha, there we go. So now if you, I was actually going over the 2023. So this is actually the 20, and there's not a ton of difference except they added the tables. So folks could put stuff in there, but let's look at, so here's the worksheet. This is the Boulder County only. These are the questions that they asked for in their questionnaire this year. And so here we go, like this. I think this question right here, Graham, it's really, I think it addresses kind of the things that we were asking about, the historical inequities in the program description. So yeah, that's the page. So you have, I think you do have this copy, Cassie, so you can look at it, and that's the one. But as you can see, of course, these didn't change this year. We still have this, you still have this part right here. These are the ones that we talked about. So if we adopted that other questionnaire, we would probably recommend to remove this question and just simplify it to the program description. Right, that's probably what would go away if we adopted the other one. Of course, I talked about the target population and why that's important to us, in particular because of how council, when they created this fund, who it's meant to serve. Then the next question is really around how do agencies determine what kind of program to deliver? And I think this question was really created because it felt like people were doing what they've been doing for years and not really being critical or thoughtful about, is this program still needed, or is this what we should be doing? And so we asked this question to see, so that you all can see, is like, yeah, as an agency, we have thought about the needs of the folks that we want to serve, and you know, yes, Crystal, go ahead.
I like the question. I think it's important. I wonder if the second part should maybe ask them to give an example of findings from the assessment, like, in completing the assessments, like what was, an interesting finding or something you want to share from your agency in the past 12 months or, assessment cycle, right? So we can get a little specific, like, well, we found that, a majority of the participants that were coming in were single adult, not single adult, but like, single parents, or, just asking them to give us a little more to think, be a little more thoughtful on that. I don't know what you guys think.
Would that be helpful to learn a little more about what they actually learned from their needs assessment?
It is my sense that not a lot of them perform needs assessments, but merely reference other needs assessments. Like you'll reference national data or maybe a needs assessment that the city performed or purchased, or the county or something like that. But I don't think, not even half of the nonprofits have the resources to perform one their own, right? Aside from the surveys.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Typically what I see when I read this is a lot of like, they get stuff from their surveys. They use
Right.
that as part of their needs assessment. It's like, we survey our clients at the end of the program, and, to Crystal's point, this is where they say they shared, what worked or what didn't work for them. I do agree that
Yeah,
not every agency does that.
Yeah, I guess I always thought that surveys were more about how well is the program being delivered, like, is this nonprofit, were they happy with their service, so to speak, and less about what does this community need. But I guess it does both things.
It can, and Martha is back in the. I didn't know that she was gone, but Martha, did we lose? I didn't even know you were gone. You were still there.
Oh, I got home, so I switched from my phone to my computer.
Okay, so we're talking about the needs assessment question, and Crystal gave the idea of asking them to provide an example of what they learned from the needs assessment, and then Graham and I were talking about the fact that many of the agencies don't even do a needs assessment, or they point to national data or some of their own survey data, program data that they do per program surveys, and talking about the legitimacy of that. So I guess the question I have for you all, is this question helpful to you? Does it help you in thinking about, is this program something that the city of Longmont taxpayers should fund?
I think it's helpful. I think they're taking data and using that data to create programs specific to meet the needs specifically. But I guess, with Graham's feedback, yeah, it's like, are we, what exactly are we trying to pull out here? And can we get a little more specific? So do we want to know that? Because if you take national data, like, national is great, but I think different regions vary as
Correct.
to what the needs of that population is. And so I can go use the United States data, but there's so many outliers, and it's not going to necessarily reflect the population of Boulder County, and vice versa. So just wanting to throw that in there.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point that getting rid of that second question and asking something more specific, and we'd have to think about what specific things we want to ask for may help with that. Like, what's specific to Longmont or to, Boulder County needs, and how did you arrive at those needs, right?
I think it's a very important and relevant question, because especially if they are pulling from like national data, that's not necessarily going to be specific to here or something that people in our community are going to need. And it's definitely like their individual, like it's our our tax dollars. So I think it's a good question, but especially for the agencies that don't do a needs assessment, I'd be curious as to like, I wonder if it can be done in a way that provides specificity to Longmont and this population.
Okay.
I mean, would it help if just on that question, the needs of the target population in Longmont?
Well, I mean, not
Or is that-
necessarily because remember, there are agencies that apply only to the city of Boulder, right? So
Okay,
we can't say just, I mean, we would have to say the needs of the target in Longmont, Boulder, Lafayette, and unincorporated Boulder County, right? So this is not a Longmont only
yeah,
application.
okay.
We'd have to include everybody on that. I wonder though, I mean, I love this conversation, and I wonder if, and I'm trying to use what Crystal mentioned earlier that I wrote in my notes and think about. So we say, describe how the agency determines the needs of the target population, develop program services. What? So what they're asking for is, okay, so the question there is, to Grant's point, what community assessments or factors, like what did they use, right? They're asking, did they use stuff like census data? Did they use, did they use, we do a human services needs assessment, right? Where we interviewed over 1,000 people in Longmont of mixed social economic backgrounds, right? Are they using ours? And they could say, yeah, we're using the Longmont Human Services Needs Assessment. Or we're using our post-program surveys to ask what other needs or what needs do our clients have. So I'm trying to think, maybe the question is,
Maybe, and it could be like, and does it match those needs of the population, like the city or population that you're serving directly, right? Like maybe or does it reflect? Is it reflective of?
Yeah,
the
and we don't need to
population
we don't need to wordsmith tonight. I really encourage you, if you all have ideas, we can bring it back. What I want to do is identify the places where we really want to continue to work and bring it out. But yeah, Crystal, I think that's talking about, does your assessments reflect? I'm gonna write that down. These are just ideas. Reflect your target populations. I'm just taking notes here. Okay.
Yeah, because I want to know like that they are looking at it and they're not just making assumptions, right? But that they're really reviewing the data and considering the direct population that they're serving. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So again, I've taken notes, and I will send you all and the rest of the board kind of notes from this meeting so that we potentially can have a conversation at the February meeting. We'll see how busy it is. You all have a lot of work ahead of you as a board. But I will definitely create something here. Let's go on to the next one. And it's also, again, this is also a similar question. It's really around, why are you doing what you're doing? And do you have any evidence that this actually works? For example, I mean, we do fund some agencies that are doing some innovative stuff like equine horse therapy, right? Or equine therapy. It's been around, but it's innovative, right? And we're funding that. The recovery cafe model is not new. It's been around for a while, but it's still a model in development, and they're learning. So we do fund some new things, and we want to know, you know, what evidence is there that this actually works? And again, I think part of the rationale for this question was there's agencies that have been funded for as long as we have been providing human services funding. And they've been doing the same program for years and years and years and years. And it could be very well effective, but we want to know if they are thinking critically about their programs and how they have evidence to demonstrate that they are actually doing what they're meant to do.
I will say I often worry about this question. I think it's a good one and needs to stay, but I think it necessarily inhibits innovation or prevents innovation. You know, there have been new nonprofits that are trying out new things that can't get funded with us because of this, more or less, you know, because like Queer Asterisk, for example, after COVID, they were doing a bunch of telehealth, mental health services over the phone, and their response to this question was like, well, nobody's been doing that. Like this is fairly new. So there's not a lot of research or evidence-based, you
Right.
know.
And they weren't funded the first year they applied.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm just
Well,
pointing
and
that
now-
out. I'm not suggesting a change in the question. Just
Well, and to be fair, on the, you know, part of and I'm not sure if it's actually written down, but part of the principles of this funding is that this funding is not necessarily meant for startup nonprofits, right?
right.
Not that we can't fund you, but it's not necessarily meant to be a startup. Like you need to have a program in place, right? And of course they did have that. They had been doing that telehealth. I think of another project that hadn't started that we didn't fund. This is before your time, Martha and Crystal. Remember that glean, what's it called? Where you go and pick up fruit after it's been, you know, the initial harvest. What's that word called, Graham?
Oh, gleaning or
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember that gleaning. They hadn't even started yet, right?
Yep.
And we didn't fund them because they had no evidence of success yet. And we said you can apply, you know, after you start.
Yep.
You know, but we have funded some pretty new agencies. Like this year, we funded my Wealth Being that scored high enough, and it's only been around for a year. And we funded Queer Asterisk the second year they applied.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I understand your point, and I think we've demonstrated that we have funded, you know, innovative stuff as well.
Sure.
well, I mean, you could, I don't know, you could add that this is or would be an effective model, so that if you said or would be, it would open it, or does that make it more complicated?
I
I
like,
think
Consider.
that provides an opening.
yeah, it gives you the opportunity to explain how, which I
Yeah,
purpose of the question.
All right, I took that note down.
I also wanted to add, I wonder, instead of like describe any evidence, please provide evidence. It's more direct, like show me what you're working with. Give me some something to work off of, and because it's like describe any evidence, like I feel like we're kind of just beating around the bush. But if we say, please provide some evidence, or like, you know, whatever, to show that this is an effective model for the target population. And then how do you know the program is likely to achieve its goals? I mean, I'm not a big fan on like the second question. But I mean, it's also not a bad question either. I just get stuck up like with like, if there's too many questions in one question, then it gets kind of diluted and they're not answering directly, right?
That's a good point. Do we reduce?
It's like when you're in an interview and they ask you 3 questions in one, and you're like, wait.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I
Yeah.
will bring this up to, I think that's a great way to bring up to the collaborative is, are we diluting the answers because we're asking too many questions? Like one of my, like I talked about, one of my pet peeves is that first question on the agency narrative. And I've always advocated for, I think the agency goal should be its own question, because I think those are super important for an agency to have. You know, an agency without vision or goals is an agency in my mind that's floundering. So yeah, are we diluting the answers because we're asking too many questions within a question?
I think so, because then they can't provide like the hardcore evidence on what exactly we're wanting to know. And we can't really focus on the answer and determining whether they meet that because we're trying to focus on two questions, you know?
Okay.
Like I'm
Yeah.
trying to determine based off of too much information that might be different from one another.
Okay, I wrote that down. Okay, good. Anything else on this question? All right, then I'm going to keep going. And this question is important because we want to know that it's this kind of goes back to the DEI type of stuff as well, right? Because we want to know, you know, if, for example, your program is focused on LGBTQ community, right? Like you know, out bold or queer asterisk, you know, how are they trying to engage in meaningful ways with those potential clients? You know, what are they doing? How are they being culturally responsive to how those clients best are engaged with, right? So we wanted to tell us, and I'd love to hear from those that have read some of the answers, if you have felt that if folks have been thoughtful about this, or they just say we put out flyers, or you know, what kind of answers have you seen so far with this?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of thoughtfulness. And I had to dig around to get some, sometimes it wasn't even within the question. And so, you know, we could even do something like, how is your outreach different from, you know, the typical, you know, flyers or whatever. Like how, like, I mean, we're gonna have to develop the question, but how is it different? How is it more creative, right? And is it working, you know?
Right. And again, we don't have to wordsmith, but I thought about something. How do you? Here's a thought. I'm throwing it out there. How do you oh, I just lost it. How do you modify, tweak, I don't know what the word is, your outreach and engagement efforts in culturally sensitive ways to ensure that your program will meaningfully engage? We cut out that first whole thing and just say, you know, what do you do differently, right? How do you adjust your outreach and engagement work to ensure that you are being culturally sensitive and responsive to your target population? Something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and even if you say like, what are some creative ways that your organization is doing this? Like, I'm gonna be less apt to put like, well, we put flyers because that's not creative. Like, we all do that, you know. So yeah, I like kind of what you're saying, Aliberto.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, when I was on the board of Intercambio, you know, it was really when the start of, in particular with the immigrant community, what's it called? WhatsApp app became really popular. And I think that Intercambio did a really good job of using that WhatsApp platform at reaching their target population, because folks were using it to communicate, you know, across the world. And so they really bought onto that. So yeah, I want to see things like that. Okay, so if you're, you know, if there's a specific social media platform that certain populations are using, are you taking advantage of that? Right, adapt. Yeah, Martha, exactly. Something like that. So we don't have spent tons of time wordsmithing, but knowing that we want to work on that question, and I'm going to look at this recording next week and get highlights from it to share with our partners. But okay, we'll continue to work on that. The next question is really around, we want to know that that agencies are actually evaluating, right, their programs, that they are taking, a critical thinking approach at their work. That they're not doing it just because they've been doing it for years, but that they're evaluating, and then not only evaluating, I think that last piece, or that second question for me is super important, is how do you use the evaluation? How do you use your learning, your data to modify the program or to improve the program?
Yeah, and there's 4 questions in this question.
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe we can reduce it.
I think if we get rid of, if going back to that first piece, if we adopt the Boulder County piece, I think the please also include how you will measure it. I think that would be, we would get rid of that from there. I think so it would just be the first. There's still 3 questions. Describe the program evaluation process. How is evaluation? And I don't know if I really know if I don't judge this question, but in my mind, how you develop the evaluation is less important to me than the fact that you actually do it and that you use the results to make changes. Does that make sense?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we could, I would argue that we get rid of the how is the evaluation designed and implemented.
Mhm.
I'd support that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
second, third, and fourth that.
Yeah. I think tell us about the evaluation process and tell us how you use what you learn to improve the program.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I will get rid of second question.
Yeah, Alberto, your wording, I think, is better than here. So, it's more direct. So,
Yep. I think the idea is we just want to make it easier. I've been having all these meetings with our nonprofits as I'm working on these scopes of service. And some folks have written me paragraphs for their activities. And I tell them, look, these scopes of works are meant to do 3 things. One, they're really meant to tell us what you're going to do. They're meant to tell us who you're going to serve. And they're meant to tell us what you expect to change. I don't need a paragraph. You could cover that in a few words, right? So I'm going to provide a community market for people so they can be more self-sufficient. And I'm going to serve folks with low income with that community market. And they're going to report that they have more self-sufficiency, whatever. They have more food security because they're coming to my community market. End of story. That's all I need. And so I'm trying to help folks get to the meat of what they do. There's no, I don't need the paragraphs. I am teaching early childhood to low income students in Longmont. And according to TS Gold, they will be kindergarten ready when they're done with my program.
And I think it works both ways, Alberto, because you can tell them, like, we're looking at like 30 applications. And after a while, 4 paragraphs, it just starts to jumble together.
So maybe, to that point, maybe we consider lowering the character limit. You see the character limit right there is 2,500. What if we were to say, hey, can we just give them 1,000 characters to write this?
Yeah, and it would force them, because then they can't just copy paste. Or else it's going to be cut off, right? So it's going to force them to put some thought into it and make it make sense and cut and paste what they really want to share.
Okay.
So I think it's good on both ends.
All right, I will put that down as well. All right, moving on. So this next one is yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, it's not scored. We don't, it's just kind of like, what do you, is there anything you want us to know? It's additional information. And then we get into the numbers, right? I mean, this is just how many unduplicated clients are you going to serve? And within Boulder County, Lafayette, City of Boulder, City of Longmont. Wait, is that City of Longmont twice? Oh, no, City of Lafayette only. Okay.
Bertha?
Mm.
For the additional information, I wonder too, like if we could put something like, what sets you apart from other organizations who provide the same services?
Yeah,
You
we
know?
could, I mean, yeah, we could do, so that is actually captured in something that you all don't necessarily review. That I'm gonna scroll back up, sorry. That is already captured. Technically, it should be captured again, but this is talking about asking 50,000 questions in one question right here. Right? Unique services provided and how you complement. You know, there's like 4 major questions in one question that drives me nuts.
So what if we replaced that question? We took that one off of the 4 and used it below so that they could really tell us like what sets them apart, what makes them different. You know,
We could do
why
that.
you and not so and so.
Right. I mean, I'm happy to bring it up to the partners. I will say that I have been advocating. Yeah. So I'm happy to bring it up.
And I think maybe if we added what Crystal just said, we don't need the additional info, right? If we're not going to score it, I don't know, do we
You're
need
right.
that? Because it's just,
Well, I think they just want to give them a chance to share, you know. So again, these are all just, we want to know race, ethnicity, and this is based, I think, on census data, same, the census format. We want to know gender, and we want to know AMI as well. I always, when I was applying for this grant, I always struggled with this question because my agency didn't use AMI. We use federal poverty income limits, which is different. And so I had to kind of sometimes do a little bit of math to make sure that I would fill this out correctly. Because AMI and FPIL are different. And then we ask them, you know, we do ask them negative or a narrative, not negative, a narrative around, is there any information that they want to, if they want to share with you? Like, for example, here's where I would say, yeah, I would usually write here, yeah, we use federal poverty, not AMI. I would usually put that statement in there. Or if you don't track income, why not, right? Because I think that's an important piece. The program budget's really important, and this is where you all can see it. So the program budget. So one of the things I've been telling agencies in my meetings with them is, and when we do training. So this funding, just so you all know, and so when you're looking at this at the program budgets and you're reviewing, and I will share this with the larger board as we get closer. This funding is primarily meant to fund program costs, not general operating. So let me tell you the difference. Program costs are costs associated with the service delivery of the program. General operating costs tend to be more about the on day-to-day operations of the agencies. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. So, you know, if they were to say, well, we're going to fund $500 in printing, then my question would be, are you printing, you know, your general appeal letters for donations? Well, we don't fund that. But if you're printing letters to targeted population, or or to Crystal Point flyers, then yeah, we'll cover that, because that we consider that as part of program costs, right? That's part of the outreach and engagement. And so I think that's important to remember in the program budget piece is that because some folks will put general operating and I have to ask them, okay, so how is that connected to your program delivery? But one of
Where
the
does
other things that,
staff
go
fall
ahead,
under?
where does what?
The staff fall under?
Program. As long as like, we typically don't fund somebody's development director, but any program staff, any, case management, resource navigation, etc., that's all program. And in fact, I always tell agencies, I think that's probably the best thing to use this money for, is to help fund your staff, your program staff. Now, if you need it for other things, like if you got to buy food or you got to, whatever, that's fine. But program staff, in my mind, is the best use for this funding. And we'll even cover their taxes and stuff. I mean, you because it's associated with. I mean, you could consider that general operating, but it's associated with the program delivery. So yeah. So that's just something to know about the program budget when you all look at it. We want to make sure. And I think the other big thing is Longmont funding is not meant to be the primary funder for any agency, right? And so, and I tell agencies all the time, if I see that your program request in Longmont is 50% of your entire program budget, that's a red flag for me. All right. I'd like to see between, 0 or 0, in the 0.5 to about top 20%, range, depending on the agencies. So those are two things about that. And here's the program narrative. Just kind of says it, that's pretty straightforward. If you have shortfall or excess. So I'm not going to go over this because here's really where you all also look at and score, right? And that's your program. This is your scope of work. This is the actual, okay, I've told you what our program is, why we do it, how we evaluate it. So now I'm going to tell you, this is what we're going to do in 2024. And so these are activities, and we try and provide, we try and give them examples, right? So what are you doing? So you're gonna host a 1-hour strawberry picking class. That's fine. And that then you're gonna tell us how many. So here, we're gonna do 12 classes in Boulder, 8 in Lafayette. We think we're gonna have 20 people come to at least. A lot of folks, this is where they struggle, is that they think that that having 20 people is an outcome, and it's not. It's just an output. And so I guess the question I have around this for you all is, as you're reading these, is there another way to word these that might make it more clear for you about what they're doing? I think it's pretty clear now, but if you all have thoughts, I'm willing to listen. Because we give them examples, right? We say, what are you doing? Where are you doing it? How many you're expecting? We ask them, how long is it going to take? When are you going to do them? And then we ask them, who are you working with? Right? Tell us your partners. And then we say, what happened because of what you did? Right? And then we ask them, how did you measure that? And what are the things that told you that actually happened?
Excuse me, how do we know, like unduplicated, how do we know that, or how are we figuring that out? Does it mean no, they don't get any other programs, or?
No, it's unduplicated within their own programs. I mean, they won't know if someone is going to the R Center and then to, Growing Gardens, Growing Gardens wouldn't know that you went to the R Center for food and you came to.
Okay.
So it's unduplicated within their programs. Yes,
Okay.
Crystal.
So one thing I was just thinking of too, Aliberto, like the measurement tool, like that's pretty straightforward. And I heard you say like it's pretty straightforward, like the language is pretty clear, but I just want to be sensitive to like any future board members that might join. Some of the language might be a little confusing or new.
Right.
Especially if we have folks join whose whose first language is something other than English. So as we're going through the questions or you filter through, I would even encourage just like simplifying some of the words, so that one, let's not assume that the agencies, speak this language. I mean, and two, the board members who are going to be scoring them, making sure they are, up to date as to like that they understand what you're asking and that they're able to read the narrative of the information that they're providing. Just something that I wanted to point out, because especially with such large applications like this, I know after a while it just kind of blurs, if it's not like direct, kind of clear layman's terms English, all these fancy words can kind of just, go over your head. And it might not be the case for a lot of folks, right? I just want to be sensitive to both the organizations as well as the board members who are grading them.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That's good feedback. How do we make it simpler?
I kind of wanted them to like tell me the answer of it, if that makes sense. Like I noticed a lot of people like made their own statements based on the examples, like with their own programs data, but then they like left the number be the number sign, or like they didn't put what I wanted. So I couldn't tell if that was going to be like impactful or not, because they chose to like leave it as an X or a number sign without giving me like an actual estimation.
Yeah.
What they thought.
Yeah, and that makes it, that's why my work after you all do that, that's what it takes. I've been doing this, my head's been down to the grindstone for the last month, trying to help people get to that answer, Martha. Because for example, they'll say, I'm trying to think of one, say something like, somebody will, mental health ones, I'm trying to remember, there's like, they will at the end of the program, they will have more self-confidence or feel whatever term they use. And I had to explain to them, so that's a good outcome statement, but we need to know for our contract, we need something that we can measure, right? So tell me how, and you can tell me in numbers or you can tell me in percentage, right? You can say at the end of the program, 90% will report that they feel more confident, or 5 out of 10 will say whatever, and one of the things I want to do this year is I do want to have a training for the applicants and go over this again. We did this back in 2019, but there's new staff, there's new, there's new everything. And so I see a lot of struggle with this.
Like I'm looking at the program outcomes, and then it's even says like why couldn't we just say like what are some positive changes that are occurring as a result of the activities, right? More direct.
So give me an example of that.
So like go up.
All right.
Right, go up more. Right there. Outcomes are brief descriptive statements that measure the positive change that will occur because of program activities.
Right.
So like, is that the question, or this is just the prep and then that's the example?
That's the definition of an outcome.
Okay.
And then that's the example. Like, so you could put the word definition.
Okay.
Outcomes, this is what an outcome is. It's a brief description that measures the positive change that will occur. I actually don't like the word positive. Because I think outcomes by their nature aren't always necessarily positive. I just think you should measure them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could have negative outcomes, right? And then that's where program evaluation and comes into play. Like if you're getting negative outcomes, then you learn from negative outcomes as much as you learn from positive outcomes. So I don't like the word positive. I would say what changes
Yeah.
because of what you did, right? So you do something and something. So like this meeting, what's going to change because we're doing this? Well, our outcome is that we will have recommendations for the board to consider, right? That's the outcome of this meeting. The activity is we are meeting and discussing, and what's going to change is potentially the application. Maybe 10% of the application, maybe 20% of the application. Who knows? We don't know yet, but we're hoping that that the change is that something is going to change. So I hope that makes sense.
No, it did. I thought for some reason that was its own question, but I see that it's the definition, then it gives an example, and then it leads them into a space where they can answer that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I don't even like this stuff here. I don't think we even need it. I mean, I just want to know what changes. End of the day, I want to know, what's going to change. And I know that some programs, like I was talking to the PI program today about their outcomes. Some folks are saving for a long time. It takes them more than a year, longer than our contract with them or our agreement with them. I get that. But I still want to know what do you expect to happen to those people that are in your program, right? In PI's case, they're going to learn, they're going to complete their financial education. They may start saving more. They're going to ultimately have a purchase that they're going to do, right? An asset that they're going to purchase. So, I don't even think we need that. I'll bring that up. I do want to know how they measure. Is it surveys? Is it, like, again, going back to PI, for me, a measurement is, oh, hey, they bought the house. There you go. That's the measurement. They're in the house, or they got their degree, or they started their business. That's typically what PI funds are used for. So anyway, and then of course it goes on. But we can try. I can bring it back to the group to the Funders Club, but how do we make this simpler?
I like it.
All right, so that's the application. Before we do that, I do want to kind of spend a little bit of time, and I need to go back and get it, look for it. My apologies. Give me 1 second, please.
Before we jump off with the other thing, I really like the unduplicated data being part of it, just because like I know there's some people that like are repeat customers, if that makes sense. Like
Right.
I'm always interested in, like, because we get so many people who come through Longmont for whatever reason, like what helps them stay, what helps them like find a resource. So I like that unduplicated pieces of the data.
Yeah, we try and make sure that we get unduplicated information. So let's spend the last, we said we're going to go till 8, so we got about 14 minutes left. I just want to spend a little bit of time. I think this is probably, again, larger conversation with the board, but I wanted to just show, in particular, Cassie, who's never seen it. This is the actual evaluation, right? And we have we do a what's it called? Likert scale 1 to 5. We do a weighted, and the weighted basically is the board decides, okay, here's what's most important to me, right? Or what we want to give this question for whatever reason more value, and so they weight it. So for example, and this is in connection. So this is the first question. does the community change response align with our prioritized activities? And you will all have that sheet about our activities and what we want to fund, our 6 pillars. And so you get to read that question and say, okay, if like one of our thing is improving access to mental health and physical health, right? So does their community change talk to how that program is going to increase access to health, right? And then you score that based on a 1 to 5. And this is the needs assessment question right there, right? So we're not even looking at yet the program description. That actually comes a little bit later. So you're kind of skipping around. Maybe we should put it in order, Graham. I just thought about that. Yes, Crystal.
I'm just gonna throw this out there, Aliberto. The 1 through 5 really got me. Because there's so much variables within it. And I'm curious if we want to do like a 1 through 3, you know, I'm absolutely impressed. They're meeting the need, or they didn't really answer the question.
We could do 1 through 100. I mean, at the end of the day, we could choose whatever we want. I think I'm fine with
Okay.
anything. Yes, Cassie. Oh, you're muted though. We can't hear you.
I mean, to me, it would make more sense if instead of saying does it, it's to what extent, and then the 1 through 5.
Or 1, 2, 3, or 1 through 10.
Yeah, it
I mean,
makes more sense if it's to what extent.
we
I
could
don't
change
know.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we could bring that back to the board. I mean, all the numbers do is it affects the ranges at the end. And I gotta think about what lowering it from 1 to 3, how that would change. I need to think mathematically, what does that do to your ranges? Do you have an idea, Graham?
That could screw up our standard deviation formulas, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it wouldn't screw it up. It would just my question, Graham, is it wouldn't screw it up because it would be across the board, right? So we would change the staff 1, 2 to 1. It would. My question is, does lowering the number, does it create broader or tighter ranges? I don't know. I need to think about it mathematically.
Yeah, I think if you do a few math examples, you'll see, but I think it will, right, because you're multiplying it. So if you multiply 3 by 3, you get 9, right? But if you
Right.
multiply, so
Another thing I wanted to add too is like, if we don't do the 1 through 3, which is okay, because we don't want to, it's like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Maybe we give some definitions as to what 1 is, what 2 is, what 3 is, what 4 is, and what 5 is. So that we can reference back when determining and say, okay, based off of the definition of 4 or 3, I feel like they're more aligned here versus us having our own definition of 1 through 5. You know what I
Well,
mean?
Up at the top, it defines the 1 through 5,
yeah.
row 2. But yeah, I mean, 1 through 3 would be similar. I mean, simpler.
Yeah, I can do some math and bring it back to the board. I think if you do change it, it will affect the ranges. And what I'm not sure is mathematically, does it make it harder to receive funding or easier to receive funding? I don't know.
And that's okay. I didn't see this on my funding application. I didn't know that existed. So
It should. Yeah, it should be on everybody's. I made sure.
So
I'll check again.
I'll
I'll
have
check
to go
again.
back in and see if I can find it, but I don't remember seeing that. So it was really hard for me to really determine the definitions of 1 through 5. But now that I see that, yeah, then that's very helpful.
Yeah. So then the next question is, again, with the assessment piece, does the agency, or to what extent does the agent, a satisfactory assessment determine the needs of the target population? You know, one question, are they doing it? And then you get to rate, yeah, they're not really doing it. Then you give them a 1. Or if you think that their surveys are sufficient, but not great, you can give them a 3. Or if they're, hey, you know what, they're doing some real. I will tell you that will hurt smaller agencies, right? I mean, that's a reality. If you're a small agency and don't have the capacity to do it, that may hurt your score, you know? So that's something to be considerate about. And then again, the best practices piece that we talked about. Do they provide sufficient evidence to make sure it's something that is effective? Does the agency, going back to this is the outreach question, and we can change it based on our question. We could say, does the agency clearly, to what extent does the agency clearly show that it is modifying or adapting its outreach, to use Martha's word, adapting its outreach to reach the target population, right? Then the evaluation question, and here's where we asked, do they use that data to improve the program? And then we ask about, does the agency, this is where the program discussion, and we're really more focused on the historical inequities piece, right? But if we get rid of that question because we adopt so this would have to be changed, right? It would have to reflect what is in the larger questionnaire, or we might have to break this up into multiples questions. But I want to show you where it was. And then here's the outcome, and it's actually pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of questions. Do you think that the scope of work has meaningful outcomes? Right? So when you're reading that scope of work, are those outcomes, are they meaningful? Are they going to make a difference? Right? And you get to decide that. And we think that's an important question, so we weighted it by 3. And then this is about the measurement tools and indicators, right? Are those, is what they tell you that they're collecting, do you think that will demonstrate that clients are better off, right? So if it's post surveys and they tell you, like, you look at the outcome and you look at the post and you look at this and you look at how they're measuring it, are those things working well together? Now, if you all want to change these and focus on other parts or add more, like if you want to focus on the outputs or on the partnerships, we could. I mean, we could say, to what extent does the agency demonstrate their partnerships in their scope? Or that they're trying to collaborate or not duplicate efforts. Yes, Kathy. Or you went off mute, so I thought you were going to say something, and so did Graham.
Sorry. No.
I'd like to say this is my favorite part of the scoring part. I actually start at the end for scoring, and I read the program activities, and that helps my brain to see, well, what actually does this program do, and is it a meaningful outcome, and do they know it makes people's lives better? And then I go back and start at the top and work through all the other stuff. But I think it's good. I think it's an improvement over, the logic model stuff. As much as I liked it, I think it, to Crystal's point earlier, it created a barrier for, folks who might not have a peculiar kind of education that would help them fill out these grant applications. Or, I mean, the YMCA can afford a grant writer full time, but certainly most of the companies, most of the nonprofits can't. And so you're dealing with folks just trying to do good work, and they're squeezing this in the evenings, and they don't necessarily are very sophisticated and shouldn't be penalized for that. So I think that this part's good.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the evaluation? Because I want it to be meaningful for you all, right?
Man, would I have loved to see that incorporated into one of the answers. Just like an agency person being like, well, I'm squeezing this in at the end of a long day kind of thing, because that's, the nuts and bolts of most nonprofit work. playing jingle with time.
Right.
So maybe the feedback, Aliberto, to the agencies is like, hey, you know, speak to us as if we were sitting in front of you having a conversation with you. You wouldn't blurt out all these, you know, copy paste answers, right? And so we want that kind of organic response of, you know, so that we can really, because you can only get so much, right, out of the writing itself. But if someone's really organic, like, you know, to Martha's point, then we feel it more, we understand it more, we're connecting with them and seeing the good work that they're doing.
Like
Okay.
the dentist one, when the dentist was like describing like the improvements in that person who had like 4 cavities or whatever.
Dental aid.
The storyline that was there was like by far more important than like the data stuff that they put in like the application. I remember that.
Right. Well, and we were going to discuss that here, but you know, this is a much larger, but is it time to take a look at how we do our hearings and say, and make it less about Q&A and more about bring us stories about how you're working? I mean, just throwing it out there again, not that this group would answer that question. That's a much larger board conversation, but it's something to think about how we do we also revamp how we do our hearings to get to more of that meat of what you do and how you make a difference in the community. So I don't think this group has to answer that question. I'm just, since we brought it up, I'm throwing it out there. All right. Well, we are 1 minute at time. I want to thank you all. I got some great notes. I will draft something up. I probably will not be in tomorrow, but I will do something for next week. I appreciate your time tonight, and we will see if once we get these notes out, we can decide if this task force needs to meet again, or we have met our goal of giving enough to the board for them to consider, and we're done. But let me write those notes out, and then we can make that decision at the February meeting. All right. Have a good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Can I
Yes,
hold you,
Crystal.
Aliberto?
Yeah. Let me stop the share and let me stop the recording. There.
Okay.